So, dear Mike, what shall the Italian fans of IQ expect from your show in February?
Well, we're doing. We're still doing a fair bit of the Road of Bones material.
Hmm.
Um, we're doing a couple of things that we haven't done for many years. In fact,
Hmm.
one track that we haven't done for about 15 years, I think. So that'll be interesting. And we're going to be playing a couple of new ideas just to try them out live to see how they work.
Talking about the Road of Bones, the album has got quite a dark mood. What can you tell us about the genesis and the evolution of the composition and the recording on the album?
Oh, I don't know what to say really. I think a lot of IQ albums do have a dark mood.
Yeah.
Um, it's just kind of where we are at the time. I always think when, particularly the way we tend to write really is that I start writing music and we'll either go in and try them out together or I'll just carry on writing and finish them. But then Pete will come up with the lyrics. And specifically with the track, The Road of Bones, he sat down with me and asked me what I was thinking when I was writing the music, because it is quite, we've always agreed that it feels quite filmic. It feels like the soundtrack to a film, I think. And I think particularly with that track, it just happened that I was watching a lot of Scandinavian murder, like detective murder series on TV, because they're so good quality and they really kind of draw you in. And I think, I don't know, maybe I was influenced by that a bit, but that's pretty much what Pete took away from it and went away and came up with the lyrics.
Yeah, and talking about movies, what can you tell us about the Subterranean movie?
Well, it was interesting to work on, certainly. I'd never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
And it was a different discipline for me, because normally I'm writing and I'm playing stuff and I'm producing. So I'm pretty much determined how I want things to be. But with this, of course, I had to work with the film director.
Yeah.
And so he came over for a couple of weeks from America and we went through quite a bit together. Then he went away and I started working on some of the stuff. And it was just very interesting because a lot of the stuff he just said, yeah, that's great. But a lot of the stuff, there was a lot of input from him. And actually, it's good to work with someone like that because he obviously knew what he was talking about. He had a real feel for the film and for the atmosphere he wanted. And his input actually worked quite well, I think. So, I enjoyed it. And it was good a lot of the music is new music, but a lot of it is based on the original themes from the Subterranean album. So that was good. It was like, some of it was almost like doing an ambient remix of the album. But yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and like IQ never sounded like anyone else. You've got like a really unique style. But which were like the main inspirations when you started, even with the lens, and which are your biggest inspiration right now? Musical or extra musical inspiration?
Well, that's interesting again, because I never quite understand when people say what are your inspirations, do they mean, what music, what external music determines your sound, or do they mean just what are you listening to at the time? When we first started out, certainly the interesting thing about IQ was that we had so many different influences. The one common theme for us was progressive rock, but with for me, I've always liked a lot of dance music, like house and trance and stuff. Cookie has always liked a lot of jazz music and big band music. I know Pete was very much into a lot of the new wave things, and obviously he was a massive Bowie fan. And it was. I don't know if that's why we sound like we sound now, but I think there has been a lot of influences, maybe not so much in terms of chord structures and everything, but just in terms of approach to music and allowing yourself to be a bit off the wall and different.
What do you recall about the so-called new progressive scene in Britain in the 80s? Was it something that, it was on television, it was on the radio? What do you recall about that era? It's something different from now, I guess.
It was odd because, at my great age, I don't recall much from yesterday, let alone 25 years ago. But it was odd because there did... You read in the press that there was a new wave of progressive rock, and people were writing about it and everything. But the attitude to most of the record buying public was still very much prog rock. Oh God, no, that's just old hippie shit. I'm not going to listen to that. So whilst I think it was kind of a desperate attempt to try and give it some validity. People were kind of lumping bands in together just to say, look, there is a movement happening. And I suppose there was to a certain extent, but it was quite an insular thing. And I don't think it was very, there was a lot of awareness publicly of it. I think now, for whatever reason, the term progressive rock isn't quite seen as so deadly. People are actually proud to say, you speak to anyone from the age of 18 up to 60 or 70, and they're quite happily say, rock, jazz, progressive rock, whatever, and it's got a bit of respectability about it now. I don't know why it has now, and I don't know why it didn't then, but it's certainly, it seems to be a bit healthier at the moment.
And how do you feel like when you think back at the two Paul Manel's album, Salmon and Are You Sitting Comfortably?
I don't know, really. I don't really treat them too much differently than any of the other albums. The main big difference was that we had a record company behind us, and they were able, given the budget that they had, they were able to pay for very big producers. So I think that, just as much as anything else, determined the sound of those two albums and the kind of direction of those two albums. But I think there's some good stuff on both those albums, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. And what shall we expect, like, for a new recording from IQ?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I never know. Even like I've actually written about 100 minutes of music, but I never know really what it's going to be like until we actually get together and start, fleshing out the vocal melodies and getting some lyrics on there, and then we can see what we're going to do with them. Even then, it's not until we've actually finished recording the album that I know what it is. It's an odd kind of process, really. I can never say that's a good one or that's not a good one. I have to actually record it and produce it and finish the mix before I can. Even then, it takes me a couple of months to stand back from it and look at it with a bit of space. So to answer your question, I've no idea. I always think it's best to, rather than say, the Road of Bones went down really well, so we're going to try and do the Road of Bones too, or anything, any type of music. If you try and write in any particular style, I think it inevitably comes out sounding contrived, and I think people can always tell. Really, I think that the thing to do always with any kind of artistic endeavor is to just do what's inside of you and see what comes out.
Did you ever idolized any guitar player in your life?
I don't know. I mean, I've always liked guitar players, obviously. But the thing for me is that I've never really been a guitar geek. I've never been one to hang around guitar shops and drool over 59 Strats and old Les Pauls and things. I don't know why, but I've been just as much, if not more, interested in electronics and keyboards and Pro Tools plugins and stuff as I am in guitars. So it's never been a fascination for me. If you're asking what are my favourite guitarists, I mean, my all-time favourite guitarist is Neil Young, and that does surprise some people. But I think for me, particularly with guitar, because it's such a manual thing as opposed to a digital thing, it should be all about the feel and the heart and the kind of the humanity that you can get from your guitar. So I'm not really into very technical playing, and I'm not really particularly into shredding where you do 200 notes a second or whatever. A lot of that stuff leaves me cold. I'd much rather hear someone with a bit of I don't know. You can tell that it's coming from deep inside, And I think Neil Young does that all the time. You listen to anything that Neil Young does. Often it's not very good in terms of technical ability or even tuning. Yeah. But you can tell that it really means a lot to him when he's playing it.
He's got a strong melodic approach.
Well, yeah, that, but also just a real. Sometimes he just makes a noise, but it just sounds great.
And are you still in touch with former members like Martin Orford or John Jowett or Paul Monell?
Not particularly, no. I suppose that's inevitable, really. When you stop working with people, eventually it just kind of the communication dries up. Yeah. If we have to communicate because of royalties or whatever, because I'm part of the record company as well, there will always be some form of communication because of that, or rights or permissions or whatever. But on a day-to-day basis, no, not really. And that's kind of how it should be, I think. Apart from the fact that it's completely different locations. Yeah. People need to move on and work on new things.
Yeah, it's like a divorce, between a wife and a husband. They don't see each other.
Well, I don't know. You get involved in other things, and that's what takes up your mental effort, really.
And which invitation would you send to the Italian fans for the February gig at Phenomenon?
Well, yeah. I'd say come and join us. I think people will be quite pleased to see that particularly with the Road of Bones, the album, I think it did very well for us. But just as much on record as live, we're still very much the same band. But we're kind of trying as much as we can to progress and to move forward. And I think people will be interested to see that, really.